everyone, it's Lisa and Luna from Don't Run with Scissors, back with our first Technique Tuesday video of 2015. I'm not gonna lie, this is take two. Take one actually did have our fearless little friend show up. Maybe she'll come back. But this is Luna. I decided to put a picture of her today with our new craft table, so you could all see who she was. Last video she jumped right up and made a mess. Completely threw me off, so I missed so many things I wanted to say. So we're going to take two for the first time ever in the Technique Tuesday video. It's wonderful. So anyways, I have a lot of ideas planned for the year and things I want to learn and create. So having said that, I wanted to backtrack and go over the supplies that I use, some of the techniques I have for stamping, and some of the products and ideas that I have accumulated along the way of learning about this great craft. So we're going to backtrack to stamps, inks, and papers, and a couple other different ideas that maybe you will take and embrace and try something new with. So the first things first is just stamps themselves. They come in three different types. There's the wooden block type, there's a clear set, and then there's the hybrid. Of course, there's always hybrids. Block stamps are simply that. They're mounted to a wooden block. They have a cushion and then the rubber stamp itself. You can ink these and push down really hard on them to get the impression, and you're not going to have any issue. These are very durable. A lot of people are starting to peel them off for storage purposes. I'm not one of those. I'll just buy something bigger to keep them in. Because I do like the wooden block and the firmness of the image that you get from it. We are not playing with these today, so I'm going to put this aside. These are clear stamp sets. They're very nice and thin, very easy to store. You can kind of see the images that you're going to get from here. These attach right to an acrylic block. So you can buy various sizes of these. They get bigger, they get smaller. Some are on little foam feet, so you can push them up and down. But basically it's just going to stick right to the block, and you can do what you need to do to stamp that way. Some of them have nice grids, so it can help you line up on your paper. The hybrids come in where there's the rubber stamp itself and then the cushion and this little plastic piece that it hangs onto. Depending on what you're up to, these will stick to your block, and that's how you use them. It does give you a little bit more of the firmness from the wooden block images than just using the clear stamp. One caveat on these, when you have them on the acrylic block, you don't need to push hard, because what you'll do is the ink, it just kind of spreads out and makes a mess. So you really don't need to push very hard with these at all. You just kind of need to push it down, give it a tap, and then pull it back up. These again, since it does have the cushion, does afford you that extra leverage that some of us like to put our back into it and push down. So that's an option. This is a house mouse stamp. I love these little bunnies and their hats for birthdays. So that's that. So those are what stamps are. Take it or leave it. Now let's move into inks. And this is a plethora of stuff that can happen. So basically there's a lot of things you can do with your stamp. There's lots of ways of inking it. There's lots of ways of adding color. So we're going to start there. Two things to talk about first. One is you can actually stamp into your pad and go, or some people like to take their pad and go right onto their stamp. Some people feel like they get better coverage. Either way, it doesn't matter. So we'll put you down right there. So that's one option. The actual inks themselves are, there's many. There's many brands, and I've made a quick cheat sheet here that I will post on my blog about the various types of inks that there are, what their qualities are, what they'll stick to, what they won't stick to, do they dry quickly, are they good for embossing, are they good for your Copic markers or your Spectrum Noir markers, watercolors, colored pencils. There's so many options once you get the ink on the paper, but you need to know what goes with what. So this cheat sheet will help. I will be bringing this back out periodically with the things that I do. And I did put some of the brands that I use here at the bottom, and brands that I'm aware of and have used, There's many, many more out there that I did not include, but these are ones I've actually used and do enjoy them immensely, and they're here. So let's talk about inks themselves. Primarily, most people will use one of two. They will use a dye ink or a pigment ink. Sorry, pigment ink and a dye ink. And there's very different properties of what these do. Dye inks dye the paper. So when you stamp it into the paper is sucking the color in, and once it finally dries and it's all happy in the paper, you get your final color. Pigment ink, on the other hand, it's thick. Some people compare it to mayonnaise. I don't see it, but that's okay. The pigment ink sits on top of the paper, and the pigment ink takes a little more time to dry. So your dye inks will dry nice and quickly. They go on most papers without an issue. They're very common. They're good for watercolors. You can buy permanent, but most of them are watercolor based. And pigment, these come in two different little sizes. They're great. These are teeny tiny, and you can go flip your stamps over. Remember I was saying direct to your stamp. These are helpful for that. But the difference between these pads is pretty clear. Dye inks are on a felt pad that's thin and kind of squishy, not so much. But pigment inks are on a complete sponge, and you can go right in there. Now the difference between the two, I'll show you right here with my fingers. The dye ink, you can actually see my finger. The pigment ink, my finger is covered over. So dye inks are going to dye your paper. Pigment inks are going to sit on top and make a beautiful color. One thing to remember, pigment inks, the color here is the color that your stamp actually will show up. Dye inks will dry a little lighter than the advertised type. So let's do a real... And with these acrylic blocks and clear stamps, you can see if you have a good coverage on the color. Dye inks, when you stamp them, it may appear a little blotchy until it seeps into the paper and you can see the difference happen. And let's move over to a pigment one. Stamp that. That's a nice crisp color. Pigment ink, as you can actually see right here, it does smear. It stays wet a little bit longer. I didn't get a good stamp there. But you can see here that it actually will smear if you're using it on my finger. So you want to be very careful with pigment inks, that it will smudge if you're not being careful with what you're up to. So just be conscious of that. Pigment inks, because they stay wet longer, are fantastic for embossing. And that's actually next week's video. But you could add some blue on top of it. Clear would be my choice. But they're very different, and you can see their properties. This one's evening out as it's seeping into the paper. This one's staying right on top, but it's dry now, so you can touch that. So, moving on, we have the StazOn ink, which is permanent. It's a solvent ink. It sticks to everything. It does come in many colors. You can put it on glass and wood and fabric and all sorts of things, and it stays. It's creepy. It stays on everything, but it's very cool, and it smells yummy too. I know that sounds very silly, but I do like the smell of StazOn ink. This does dry very quickly, and when you do use this on your stamps, you want to make sure that you clean your stamps immediately. Sometimes a baby wipe just isn't enough, but the StazOn stamp cleaner does help. You can put it right on your stamp and wipe it off. That's very helpful to have, but again, this will stick to anything, so be pretty careful when you do that. Chalk inks are another interesting thing. These are the Cat's Eyes color box. I'm actually going to grab another one here. It's open. A lot of people will use what they call a DTP, a direct to paper. These stamps, you can actually burnish the sides of the paper. You can antique them, or I'm very messy with what I'm doing. But you can antique them and you can run down the side and give it a different look. You can also, if you have a more juicy wet stamp pad, I really don't, this one's kind of old, you can do a direct to paper this way and make some leaves. So if you had a pretty green one, you could do all sorts of fun things, or you could add them to flowers or anything like that. Chalks are, they're permanent, they're pigment with a dye ink kind of trait. They do dry quick, they don't smear, and they come out with a matte finish, and it's lovely. And any of you have done any antiquing on sides of papers, you've used some of the other colors. They come in many, many colors. Martha Stewart makes a set. So these are a lot of fun when you just need to add something to your page or your card and you just don't know what to do. You know, running this along the side really does, this is very messy, but this does add a nice enhancement to your project. And let's see here. We'll do these next. Versamark is a watermark stamp pad. It's clear. Mine's very dirty because it's loved. But these are the pads. These are the go-to pads for embossing. You can emboss many colors, and basically it's almost, I don't want to say it's like a glue pad, but it's very sticky. So when you stamp something down on your piece of paper, you can put your embossing powder on it. You can put your pigment powder on it. Sometimes you can do ultra fine micro glitter on it, and it just makes a nice, nice image. The other thing that you can do with this is actually make a watermark. If you're on a dark sheet of paper, it will dry and you can see that watermark on it, just like you are working on a Microsoft document that is a draft or something along those lines. So that leaves us with four other ways to do some stamping that's left. Distress inks. Distress inks are the new cool rage, and they're super, super awesome. These are the minis because, to be honest with you, you don't need the extra large pads. You can get a whole bunch of those and be very happy with your day. Distress inks are water soluble. They're going to react with water, and they do amazing things. These little minis, you besides using it as an actual stamp, again, it's a hybrid. It's kind of got pigment properties with dye properties. It does stay wet a little bit longer because of how it's designed, but these little foam pads work really great. So what you can do with these create awesome, awesome, awesome backgrounds. I'll get my craft mat here. So you want to start off the page and then start on, you can swirl on. So you can bring the color right in. These are brand new, so getting the hang of getting the color juicing here. So because of these sponges being so tiny, they're inexpensive, I have one sponge for each of my little pads here. These you can get at any craft store, online. Sometimes they do some great sales. I actually got some of mine at Simon Says Stamp. But because these are of the different property, they stay wet longer so that you can blend the colors together. So once I have my little corner here all splotched out, we're going to sprinkle some water on it so you can see how it reacts. And it's incredible. Came out with another pretty fantastic property here, product. So if you spritz it, we're going to leave it alone for a minute because we're going to let everything react. And once it's done, you're actually going to see where the water is. And maybe you can see it now. It's so cool. You can see the background, it's leaving some watermarks in there, so you can do some really cool backgrounds using the Distress inks on top of so many other techniques that they have, which I hopefully will get into later in the year because now I have a whole bunch of them, so I really want to use them. So there's three others that are really quick and can be very helpful. This one in particular, this is actually using a water-based marker to color on a stamp. Sometimes you have a tiny stamp and you really just, you can't use two ink pads to do it, and you're not going to go back and overlay and everything else. So what you can do is take your marker and just color it in. Very simple. So there's the red of the flower. We're going to go in with the green. And the trick to really making this work is once it's colored, especially if you take a little while to color, Just people I know that do. All you need to do is you need to blow on it, hop on it. You need to get some moisture kicking back into that marker. So, and we're going to go and stamp, and it's just as vivid as when I colored it. It's the same color. So that is how you can do some of your stamps when you need to two-tone. Trees, flowers, birds, butterflies. This is very helpful. I wouldn't say you could color a whole stamp and then do it, but you could play. And again, just make sure you wipe that right off when you're done. They're not going to stain anything because they are water-based and they will wash off nicely, but it's nice to keep your stamps nice and clean. So, 2 other options left. They only get messier from here. I have this older stamp here, the little Easter bunny with an Easter egg, and I have some acrylic paint. You may think I'm crazy, but you can use acrylic paint in your stamping. So I'm just using this little post-it note as a palette because I don't plan on keeping this paint. I have a foam brush, and all you need to do is get it on that brush and dab it on your stamp. I guess you can stamp with anything, right? Now his ears might come out a little messy, but I rushed, so we'll see. Stamp, and there he is. This is a really detailed stamp, probably not the best to use with acrylics. As you can see, it's getting a little better as it's wearing itself out. But this is something you can do, especially with some gigantic big backgrounds. This would work really, really well. Again, you need to wash these pretty quickly. So I need to get these upstairs and into the kitchen. But that's another option. And then the last option is actually using spray glitter mists. Something I've never done, something I'm not exactly interested in doing. But because we're all here, we're going to try it. 2 options. You can spray right onto the stamp itself. We'll use this one, which I think is just going to make a gigantic mess. And get your block dirty. So we'll go this way. Stamp. And there's that. You can see where it's darker and where it's not. The other option that we have is to actually spray right on your craft mat. I think my thing's got a little. And then come in with your stamp and pick up the color. Go here. And then. So, those are your options for stamping. Those are the products that are out there on the market to do your stamping with. I hope you were able to learn something today, or pick products you really have no desire to use. Me and the glitter mist, whatever, I got them. And the acrylic paint, there's time and a place for everything. And if you didn't know it existed, then I would be remiss if I wasn't telling you about it. So that's what I have for today. Next week we're going to be doing some embossing in a really cool stained glass technique that I think you'll really enjoy. So until then, I wish you all a great night. Thanks for tuning in, and Happy New Year. Hopefully Luna and I will see you soon next week. Bye-bye.